Miss Jody here with our third video for health. As we've been these last 2 weeks, I've been reminding you about taking your notes on a half sheet, so don't forget to do that. Write the title on the back, and then we'll glue them right in order when I get them, so we can finish up our journals for the year. Also, I've been getting some emails from some parents and students about wanting to see what written work is supposed to be done along with this. And what we're going to do is just keep doing our regular work that we would normally do. So we're on chapter 6, and you would just, as you go along in chapter 6, each time you get to a section review, you do that section review and just label it 6.1, 6.2, whatever it says in the book, and then do the end of the chapter review at the end of chapter 6. Some of you have asked where you are with the health homework. I know, Brooke, I was looking into that, and I'm going to find that today and get that number from you to see what if you've turned in chapter 6 already. And if anybody else needs to know what chapters you are behind on or what you still need to turn in, just let me know, okay? All right, so we are trying to finish chapter 6. We have 3 weeks on each chapter, and this chapter is pretty intense. So there's a lot. And we started out with the first video that I did since we've been separated, systemic diseases and disorders, and I had this one little label. What I should have done is I should have given an introduction to this and given some examples of some, and then gave cardiovascular disease and all the other ones their own label, because we're still on this same label because I lumped them all together. All right, but we looked at the systemic diseases and those being affecting the entire body rather than just a single organ or a single body part. And so they have an effect on a lot of things. These particular diseases, obviously cardiovascular disease is going to have an effect on everything. So we looked at the cardiovascular diseases, if you remember, and then we went on to studying the diseases of the skin, so the things that affect the skin as a whole, and then those that affect the endocrine glands, and looking last video on the malfunctioning pituitary gland, malfunctioning thyroid gland, and then understanding diabetes mellitus as a whole, like how it all works. And we're pretty familiar with diabetes in our society, but really understanding how that works. So if you remember, I gave you 2 diagrams to work on. This one went with one particular video that helped us understand how diabetes affects the body, and then this 2-sided diagram on type 1 and type 2, so you can get some information on the difference between the 2 sides of the diabetes world, the 2 main categories. So we continue on now into the gastrointestinal diseases and disorders. So these are the ones that are going to be affecting the digestive system. And the digestive system as a whole, if you start messing with that, that's going to be the system that's going to break down the food, allow us to have nutritional support for cell building and all the things that we need to stay alive. And so it's going to be a very important system. So you don't want that system to go wrong. And so when we look at that, we have to look at all aspects, even from the entering of the digestive tract. Or remember in AP biology, when we distinguish between what was the digestive tract and what were supplementary organs, the ones that supplement the process, but the food doesn't actually travel through. And so in the digestive tract, we had the mouth, and the mouth is very important. So they start us out with actually the dental caries, which is tooth decay. So our cavities that we're used to talking about as just a normal thing that happens to most people in their mouth. So with this, it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal. Like we don't think, oh, you know, cavities, it's a systemic disease. It's just affecting so much. But tooth decay greatly affects the digestive system. Obviously, if we don't keep up with our teeth, then we're not going to be able to have the food the way we need it to get into our system and to be broken down. So they put it under this category. They understand that it isn't really this huge deal like, you know, some of the cardiovascular diseases, right? But it's still something that we have to discuss. So dental caries, tooth decay, greatly affects the digestive system, most common infectious disease in man. And anytime somebody sees that, they're so thrown back by the idea that dental tooth decay is is really considered an infectious disease. And it is, because something infectious means you got it from someone else. And what happens when babies are born, they don't have the bacteria in their mouth that causes the dental decay, and they get it from eating off of other people's spoons and other mouth contamination, like mom. And so I always tell my students, especially in microbiology, when we get to this unit on the bacteria in the mouth, I always say that you can blame your parents for your tooth decay. They gave it to you. Just give them that look when you see them next time. Just scowl at them like, how could you? I can't believe it. Anyway, okay, so it is a chronic infection caused by bacteria that adhere to the teeth. Now, the bacteria will form what's called a biofilm we refer to as plaque. So plaque buildup, and when the microorganisms, now they're part of our normal flora now. I mean, they live in our mouths. So it's, other than the tooth decay, we're not going to have super big problems with these particular bacteria. And I think, I want to say Streptococcus mutans is part of the tooth decay, but that could be something else. I have to look at specifically which species, genus and species, is the one that really gives us some trouble, but I'll look into that and give you some specifics on that. But either way, these particular bacteria, they adhere to the teeth. They create this living biofilm we call plaque. And as they are eating, and what they like to eat is that lovely sugar that we give them all the time. And there's a difference between the sugar that's the natural sugar that's made in the fruit product versus the white table sugar that's been created. And that white table sugar is really problematic because they love that, and in metabolizing that, they produce an acid. So the acid that's produced by the bacteria as a byproduct is what's actually dissolving the holes in our teeth. And so if you leave this plaque on there, you're leaving all these little guys to sit there and eat away at whatever you've also left on there that's all in that biofilm, and then to produce the acid to break down your teeth. So this is why it's important to brush our teeth, get these little biofilm creators off. So once the dissolving of the teeth and the holes get so deep, the toothache will occur when the decay reaches the nerve at the core. And so if we allow it to go on too long, and all of you have probably experienced a toothache, and it's not very pleasant. Untreated, this could actually lead to an abscess. And the abscess will be, you're going to have an infection in the joint, or the coming together of where the tooth is and inside the gum area, and it kind of gets underneath the skin, and you don't want bacteria to get in a place where they aren't really supposed to be. And that's what we see across the board with the microorganism world. We have a lot of wonderful microorganisms, and they're so beneficial to us. But if they get in the wrong place, it's not going to be good. So you don't want those guys to get under your skin and get into access even further into any blood vessels or anything like that. You're going to have some problems. So untreated, you'd be in a big deal. So you don't allow a toothache to go too long. If plaque is allowed to remain on the teeth, and this is minus the tooth decay and all that, but if you just let plaque remain on the teeth, what will happen is in that biofilm, minerals from our saliva will collect in the plaque, and it will kind of harden them. It becomes like a mineral crusty thing that we call tartar. So you're probably very familiar with going to the dentist to have your teeth cleaned, and they talk about scraping off the tartar. So we all struggle with keeping our teeth as clean as possible, because obviously, even if we brush our teeth all the time, we still have it, you know, sometimes it gets down by the areas right here at the bottom where the gums, and you don't really realize, you don't take the time to look down in there. So I printed you out some lovely little tooth decay situations here so that you could get a feeling of how important it is. Now, this is in black and white in my journal, but when you get it on the PDF on your classroom, it's all beautifully in color, so you can just gag yourself with this nice teeth decay and this wonderful tartar buildup. And look, I even made it really cute. Like, I added a little bit of tartar, and if you want to print this one out, you can print it out. If you're getting bored and saying, give me something more than just notes, print this little guy out and give him a little beautiful teeth decay like I did. And I added some little some little blood here for the next thing. Some sore, swollen gums that bleed easily in the gingivitis world. So yeah, pretty gross. But as a reminder, this is important stuff because we want to keep our teeth as healthy as possible because they will affect the gastrointestinal system. All right, so that's our plaque. If we leave it too long, it'll harden with minerals, and that will be called tartar. So you got a bunch of tartar. That's microorganisms and minerals all crusted on your teeth. So, but if you allow the plaque and the tartar to accumulate, then it's going to cause the gums to become tender, inflamed, bleed easily, and this is what we call gingivitis. So you can have steps of gross, gross, and more gross, and let's not do this. And so gingivitis is going to be a problem. Then even that, once you have the gums all swollen and bleeding easily and all that, then if you leave that too long, you're going to get periodontitis, which is going to be even worse. It's a disease in which the gums detach from the teeth and eventually the bones supporting the teeth are destroyed. And so if you remember in the history of medicine where we talk about scurvy and the lack of the vitamin C and how their bones just seem to like fall apart, this is similar in the sense that the teeth will start to like fall out of the gum area and the gum will not be able to keep it attached. So we need to keep good health of our teeth, okay? So this is one side of the diagram that comes in your PDF today. And then we have the next couple ones. Now these were smaller in notes, and I just gave a few things like what they were, what are some symptoms, and some aspects of these particular things that can go wrong with the gastrointestinal system. All right, so appendicitis. Now we remember from AP Biology the whole appendix world and how important it is to our system. Now we're starting to find out. But if the appendix becomes inflamed, symptoms may include cramp-like abdominal pains around the navel, around the belly button, and then at times then they'll move down to the lower right portion of the abdomen. And that's kind of a nice sign because if it starts around the belly button and you feel the pain move down to the lower portion of the abdomen, that's kind of a good idea that something might be going wrong with the appendix. It will be painful to the touch around the belly button, then eventually to the lower portion of the abdomen, and nausea, vomiting, mild fever, loss of appetite. So a lot of things saying something isn't right. If not treated, it may rupture, allowing intestinal bacteria to spread through the abdominal cavity. And this is life-threatening because like we've talked about before, when it comes to the microorganisms, they are beneficial. Majority of them are helping us have the life. Like 95% of them are good guys. But if we have either the 5% that are pathogenic and not good guys in any way, or those who get into the wrong place. And so if they bust out of there and they go into a place they're not supposed to be, there's going to be contaminant of that sterile area, and that's not going to be good. So it's important if this does happen. This is why we have to have it surgically removed. Colorectal cancer. So this is cancer of the colon or the rectum. One of the most serious diseases of the digestive system. And obviously anytime somebody talks about having colon cancer, it's very dangerous. Symptoms include rectal bleeding, changes in the bowels, cramps, anemia. And so obviously as you would start to have digestive issues over time, because this would be something you'd really start seeing in your bowels, then they would do a colonoscopy and they would keep an eye out for that. Dysentery. All right, so dysentery is a painful infection of the colon. So this is when the colon becomes infected by something. And most of the time, dysentery is spread by poor sanitation, bacteria, viruses, protozoa getting into water because the sewage contaminates the regular water source, and then the water source is either we either drink it or it gets washed, or like vegetables and stuff get washed by the water that's contaminated, and then it gets on your vegetables. We see that sometimes with our produce recalls. Now we live in America, and so we have great sanitation, but in some of the other countries that don't have as that aren't as blessed as we are, they struggle with this a lot. Symptoms include diarrhea, cramps, high fever, and blood in the feces. And so you never want to be in a situation with dysentery. And you can look that up to see the horrible situations in other countries so that you can remember how blessed we are with all of the things that we have here in America. All right, and then there's foodborne illnesses. Illnesses obviously coming from food. They're born from food. Almost all food contains microorganisms, and that's what we have to be aware of. But most are harmless if the food is properly prepared. So when we're looking at food and we are needing to be a little cautious because the microorganisms, we have to make sure that if it's some that cause some of the really bad foodborne illnesses, that we make sure that they're cooked properly, because undercooked or even spoiled food can cause some problems. And obviously the main problem is food poisoning. So food poisoning, abdominal cramps, pain, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. And the food poisoning is something I'm sure you're very familiar with, and because that does happen a lot. Not too bad. We do have a lot of good regulations with our food, and that's a blessing again in America, that things are kept up on, and we have the watching of the meat products and our produce and all that to make sure that things are good for us. So we're blessed in that way, but it does happen. All right, some of the main poisonings, salmonella poisoning. I wanted to note a couple of these just so you'd be familiar, and I'm a real big advocate for these particular ones. I'm always making sure that if there's meat or fish or poultry, that we be very careful with it in my home, and never like wash chicken off or something like that, because you can get the I think Campylobacter is one of the ones that if you wash chicken off, that is not good and can cause lots of problems, because when you wash raw chicken off and you think you're getting that slime off it, but then that gets into your sinks and then your dishes, and then if something doesn't get cleaned thoroughly, then you can get that particular microorganism. But salmonella is one you're probably really familiar with. That one you can get that in many, many ways. And actually salmonella is the genus, it's not the species. So this is a whole group of bad guys, different species that can cause the poisoning. So we need to be focused on meats, fish, poultry, eggs, dairy products, and shellfish. Okay, those things we have to make sure they are good and cooked thoroughly. You will get symptoms if this salmonella poisoning 12 to 24 hours after you have eaten the product that is not cooked well or whatever, spoiled or has salmonella. You can also get some of the salmonella, different species of that, from like handling animals, like our turtles and stuff here. We're really cautious about, after working in the turtle pond, to wash our hands and stuff because of salmonella. All right, E. coli poisoning. A lot of you are familiar with Escherichia coli, which is normally a good microorganism, beneficial inside the intestines, like it's supposed to be. And so because it's supposed to be in that digestive tract doing good, if he gets out of that area and maybe into another area where he's not supposed to be, that can be problematic. So you can get E. coli poisoning with beef, poultry, and other meats. And recently we've seen a lot of that with our vegetables and our produce because of the cross-contamination from the water source. So they say 1 to 8 days. You can have symptoms in 1 to 8 days. And in severe cases, kidney failure and death may result. Now, one thing that they do is the process of irradiation. That's where they take radiation, the gamma rays, and they shoot it at they allow the food to go through the gamma rays to kill off any of the microorganisms. Now, there are some microorganisms that love radiation. There's like one group, and they're part of the extremophiles. I think they're radiolarians, I think they are, but they wouldn't be able to kill off those, but majority of the microorganisms wouldn't be able to handle high levels of radiation, so you're killing off the bad guys. Now with E. coli, what happens sometimes is when, like, say the cow or something, they're getting the meat or whatever, sometimes there's a cross-contamination, like if any of the bowels are accidentally cut open, and so sometimes they have to really watch with some of these to make sure, since they're supposed to be in the intestines, and if they get out and get into a place where they're not supposed to be on the regular part of the meat, then, you know, you have problems. Staphylococcus poisoning. Now, Staphylococcus is the genus too, so there's a whole group of Staphylococcus. You've heard of Staphylococcus aureus, that's a big one. But the Staphylococcus poisoning, pre-cooked hams. Now, this is interesting because if you ever think of pre-cooked, you think, well, it's cooked and it must be good. But you ever had pre-cooked ham after a while get slimy? That's when it's time to throw it away. Okay, so pre-cooked ham, milk, custards, cream fillings, chicken salads, any of these things that are supposed to be refrigerated, if they're left out too long and then the microorganisms begin to duplicate, then you could have some problems. Now what happens is these particular microorganisms produce toxins that actually poison the food. They don't actually infect you like these guys sometimes, but they create the toxins that poison the food. And you would have 30 minutes to 12 hours before the symptoms would begin to show up, and you'd be sick from that. And a lot of these symptoms are like the food poisoning symptoms. It's just some of them are more severe, like this one with the kidney, and some of them create really high fevers instead of low-grade fevers, and in regular food poisoning, it doesn't even note that there's a fever, but some of these produce fevers, but a lot of the vomiting, the diarrhea, the weakness, abdominal cramps, just a lot of real severe sickness. Botulism is the one it's very rare, but it's very bad if you get it, and it's when somebody eats canned foods or sealed containered foods that have had contamination of an anaerobic bacteria. That's a bacteria. Anaerobic means they can survive in the lack of oxygen, and so these bacteria have reproduced in the lack of oxygen in that sealed container. So you think that it's good, but it could be, some could have survived, and if that's the case, then it creates a really bad problem. It's uncommon, but very severe. You notice it between 12 to 36 hours. And it produces a nerve toxin, and they say it's one of the most deadly poisons known. And so if you think of that, and they say something like in the book, if you eat one string bean that has the bacteria, that's a lethal dose. So it's funny because you look at these foodborne illnesses and you start to say, well, I can't eat meat, can't eat fish, can't eat poultry, can't eat eggs. You start getting panicked. Oh, can't even eat canned foods? Oh, my word. But the point is, this is rare, so it's only going to happen in certain situations. Now, when it comes to canned foods, there's a lot of this happening too. Their irradiation happening with some of the products that before they are put into the sealed off. So hopefully this would only happen here and there. But if anybody ever tries to get me to try a thing of jarred something that they made back in 1958 or whatever, hey, I got these these peppers and I canned them all those years. No, thanks though. No, I'm fine. Are you sure? No. Yeah, so that's not going to happen. But anyways, we don't have to fear because the majority of our food, we have a lot of intelligence now and understanding these microorganisms, and we know how to keep our hands clean. We know how to cook our food properly. We're a very clean nation, so we should do okay, but we do need to know these things. All right, and then the last one is that they put under the gastrointestinal diseases is the peptic ulcers. Now, these are open sores in the lining of the stomach or duodenum. So the opening sores in the lining of the stomach or the duodenum, and you could just imagine that lining being so tender and then it's just having open sores and then the acid situation. So symptoms include burning sensation in the stomach for hours after eating. And it's thought to be caused now by the Helicobacter pylori, and we talked about this before in biology, and then I think we talked about it in human anatomy and physiology also. But this Helicobacter pylori, for years we used to think, oh, ulcers are all about stress. You need to get your attitude straight, relax, and there can be some problems with stress that really create more of a situation. But it's interesting what we're coming to find out about the Helicobacter pylori and how it gets into the stomach and what it does once it's in there. And so I gave you a little diagram, and I'm going to send you a video on this particular microorganism so we can understand it more. And then a little bit about just the gastrointestinal health as a whole. I'm going to send you a video on that. So when you look at this is hard to see in this black and white, but I sent it to you in color so you can see. But this particular guy, he just is interesting looking with his little flagella and his little spiral side to him. And you remember when we talked about in the health and the infectious disease and the categories between the bacteria and the protists, which are now the chromist, and the protozoans, and the way that these microorganisms are divided, the bacteria being some of the circles and the rod shapes and the spirals. So you can see that spiral and that guy there. All right, so this little diagram will go along with the video, and there's a little bit of room left on this particular page for more notes on how this Heliobacter, what they think is happening with that, and some of the new breakthroughs in trying to help with that particular problem. All right, so that ends our gastrointestinal, and we still have a couple more in this chapter, so we're not done, but I'm just doing one system at a time, so it's not too long. All right.